Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like Diamonds. We are back again talking about redfish, late summertime in particular. Redfish spots. Why redfish spots? Because if you guys have been living underneath the cave, we have a completely free tournament going on right now. And if you're listening, you don't know what I'm doing, but I'm holding up a legit, like, WWF wrestling belt that says Salt Strong Redfish Champion on it. And the winner of this tournament is going to take home this belt. I've already seen multiple people that have said that if they win, they're going to wear it to work every day for a month. They're going to wear it to church. Really, really embrace this belt. And I don't blame them. Like, I am dying to see if we can get another one made just so I can proudly wear it all around town, including nice dinners, weddings, bar mitzvahs, that whole thing. This thing is awesome. How cool is this? It's like legit. I mean, it's a heavy, heavy belt. And so once again, if you guys have been sleeping underneath some kind of rock or coral reef, whatever it might be, we have a free tournament going on for insiders only, and we're giving this belt away. We've got some really cool slam stickers, so a little plug for our tournament. When I just realized is upside, they're both upside down, and I'm backwards. That's more the problem. So one is for redfish and snook and flounder, and one is for redfish, snook, and trout. Man, I am completely literally backwards trying to look at these things right now.
Trout, redfish, flounder, and trout, redfish, snook.
That makes so much more sense when you say it that way. So what we're doing is anyone who catches those three species or a combination of both, if you're in an area that has both, you get one of these free decals, waterproof decals for the back of your car, truck, boat, kayak, Yeti cooler, wherever you want to slap these suckers on. And huge thanks to Wyatt. What's the name of the artist name that made these?
Brandon Fenoren. He does a lot of awesome illustrations for fishing companies, and we were happy to have him design those for us. They're really, really cool. We're excited to get those out to our insiders.
Knocked out of the park. So just one more reason to be an insider. And we're also going to have Austin here, who is on the podcast. He does a really awesome job every Monday night giving away something cool. Sometimes we've done everything from, hats to shirts to we've done rod and reel before in the past. Where we give away stuff to our insider members every week just for being active in the community. And so we'll do some similar things just for this tournament. And I'll also share my screen as we kind of talk through some of these tips. So here's our community. For those of you who are members, you know what this looks like. It looks like someone here's got a nice red, only one spot. But we're going to talk about a couple of tips and tactics. One on how to do well in a tournament in late summer, because it's come up quite a bit. And number two, just overall tips on catching redfish. I know Wyatt literally just got back, as in 10 minutes got back, huffing and puffing on his way to make here in time for the podcast on a really epic day. So I know you'll have a lot of great insight here. Just what did you catch? 20 something redfish just a little while ago?
Yeah, it was somewhere between 20 and 20. Once you get past double digits, it gets hard to keep track of fish. I was trying my best because I knew we had this podcast today. Somewhere 20, 25 fish, no monsters, but still just consistent action. It was a really good day, and I'm excited to share all that info on this very helpful tournament podcast today for our insiders.
Cool. So who wants to kick it off? Who wants to start?
I mean, I guess I can, now that we've segued into it, I can go ahead and talk about some trends I've been seeing. And this is stuff that we're going to see in the community as well. But for the redfish, the past couple of weeks, we've seen, they're in late summer trends. And for anybody that's competing in this, month-long tournament, most of these fish are going to stick to those trends for the next 2 months. So everything we talk about, whether you listen to this a week from now, 2 weeks from now, is going to hold. Or if you're listening to this, next season, late summer, all these same tactics are going to apply. We know these fish are looking for areas that have high DO2. We see a lot of these fish being caught at jetties like the ones that Joe's showing right now, areas that there's going to be high current flow, areas where you're going to have a lot of cold water rushing through these zones, just because these fish late summertime are looking for cooler water. As we know, we talked about in our spots mastery course and all of our basic introductory tips where we talk about where to find fish. DO2 levels drop in areas where there's high temperature. So we're always looking for zones where it's going to be nice and cool, and those fish are going to be, localized to those zones. So don't be looking too hard up in the shallows, especially later on in the day. They might be hunting there very early, but areas where there's going to be lots of current, lots of DO2, that's always the biggest thing that I'm going to start looking for when I kind of start picking spots for reds. And you can always be sure that there's going to be good DO2 levels close to passes and inlets. So you don't need to be too far inland, anywhere near any big jetties, inlets. I know they call them different things on different coasts. I believe it's passes on the west coast of Florida, and in the Gulf and in parts of Texas, they're called inlets. So there's a little bit of a terminology thing there, but anywhere it connects to the Atlantic or the Gulf, you're going to see a lot of good DO2 levels for redfish in those zones. So that's kind of the first thing I would say to start looking for. Austin, Richard, do you guys kind of agree with that up in Jacksonville?
Absolutely, 100%. You got to find the cool water this time of year. The water's hot, so those fish are trying to get away from that scorching hot water, where the oxygen's being cooked out of it, and looking for that cooler water where they can breathe. It's just they're more comfortable in that cooler water. That the hot water is just too much.
Yeah, exactly on the same thing. Those morning bites too have been the best for me lately up here. And, if you are going to be, target them in the shallows, your best bet's going to be in those twilight periods, and really making sure as well, an incoming tide at a twilight period is a really, really good, kind of recipe for the shallows. But if not, even those shallow areas, I would still focus on, having a good, depth drop off nearby where those fish can go back after it starts to warm up.
This gentleman right here, for those of you who are watching, you get to see this. If you're listening, I'll just read it to you. But Matthew Stevens, as of right now, I believe he's winning the tournament. So went out with a friend of mine, got out at 6:30 p.m. So to your point, and that could have played just as well if it was a.m., but basically twilight. And I had a 2-man limit by 8:30, caught 8 and lost a few fish. And if you scroll down here, so great day, some really solid reds. Let's see, I'm having to move you guys around so I can there you go. But look at that one, and that's the token right there that he got in the picture. And that's what, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, somewhere close to 20ish, 21. What was the final count? 21.
I believe it was 21, the message I saw this morning. That's a solid red, man.
So it backs up what they said, twilight. And then two, Austin mentioned this offline, is go for numbers, right? If you look at a lot of these tournaments, I mean, it obviously there's not like some area that magically holds a redfish with a ton of spots. It's a numbers game. If you've been catching redfish, sometimes you get them with no spots. That happens occasionally. And normally it's 1 spot, 2, sometimes 3. And then all of a sudden you get one like this with 20, or you get one of those leopard. And that's just all about consistent fishing and being in an area where redfish are going to be. Now, of course, we also have the slam that's part of the term as well, catching a redfish and speckled trout, flounder, and or snook. But for this in particular, because I know every time we do a topic with redfish, it gets a lot of attention because it's an awesome fish to catch. It's not like a trout where they kind of max out. I mean, you can catch redfish that are, 26, 27 inches in circumference. I mean, some just monster bull reds that are so much fun to fight. And of course, the slot ones taste really good. And of course, you can find them from Texas to Virginia, which is where, most of our insider members are. So I'd love to hear anything else in terms of let's maybe talk about lures and even types of spots. Are you guys in docks? We've mentioned, being near inlets, passes. Do you like to find bridges? Are there certain types of structure you're looking for? I'd love some more feedback.
Yeah, I would say that probably, and this is going to be very highly dependent on the region that you're in. For most of the folks that are listening that are in Texas and in Florida, you're going to be primarily fishing grass flat type zones for your redfish. And the folks that are in the Carolinas, that are in Georgia, Louisiana, even some parts of Florida, in the Northeast and Northwest, there's some pretty heavy marshes, and you get up into creeks. We're seeing Spartina grass, like in the pictures that Joe's showing right now. Those marsh creeks, those are all great areas for redfish, but you need to know, where you are, what's the most prevalent type of environment close to those passes and inlets, and then you can start thinking about your tackle choices there. Most of the grass flats that I fish for redfish, I am sticking close to the shorelines, or I'm close to kind of some shallow pothole type areas. That's generally 1 to 3 feet in depth. So my presentations are never too heavy. I'm not usually throwing anything above an 1/8 ounce soft plastic, or, you know, a top water lure. My favorite recently, and pretty much what I caught every single one of my redfish on, outside of one on the bomber this morning, was the Moonwalker that we created. And it's very similar to the Super Spook Junior, but it's just a design that's been tried and true for many years. It's just a very small bait fish imitation, and just walking the dog over those potholes, again, early morning, late evening, when the sun's not right up over those fish's eyes, that's the best time to get those redfish, because they don't necessarily see terribly well, but they feed mainly dependent on, you know, their lateral lines and just sensing that there's things around them. So redfish, they'll know that there's shrimp or there's bait fish kind of fleeing from the mud. You'll see them kind of waking on stuff. They don't feed primarily based on sight. So you can get a lot of redfish on top water, but if the sun is up further on in the day and they can't feed looking straight up, or they're not going to be coming after top waters, you would be better off going with, you know, a power prawn that's got a lot of scent on it, because they do have really large olfactory senses, or olfactory systems. So bouncing those power prawns through those grass flats on, you know, the 1/8 ounce weedless hooks that we have, or the owner twist locks, you know, whichever you choose, or even a small jerkbait like an Alabama leprechaun. Any of those shallow water presentations are really awesome. But if you don't know which grass flat to go to, things like that, and regardless of where you live, whether it's you know, the Carolinas or Texas and Florida, where their grass flats are a little bit more prevalent, you can always go to docks. Docks are always a safe bet, no matter where you live. And I would say the number one lure to use on docks is just one of those big shrimp jigs. We've seen Luke do it time and time again in a lot of these lure tests, going to these docks and bouncing with, you know, 1/2 ounce jigs just right at the ends of the docks, where there's the most variable depths. So redfish typically don't stick to the most shallow parts of a dock, and they don't stick to, you know, a couple feet outside of the end. They're usually right on the last bit of the drop off, where the boats usually take off. They kick up a lot of sediment, things like that. That's usually where the most prey items are. So you can get a lot of really good redfish bouncing those shrimp jigs right on the ends of docks, regardless of where you live. It's a very safe bet. But those marshes as well, I'm going to probably let Austin and Richard talk on those, because they've been fishing them a little bit more. But those marsh environments can be really good as well. So what have you guys been seeing up in the creeks and kind of mud flats, things up in Jacksonville? And these same trends, I'm going to guess, are going to apply in the Carolinas as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So up in the marshes, well, let me backtrack a little bit. On a tournament standpoint, as Joe was saying, with going for numbers rather than, you know, a lot of tournaments for redfish are weight. So you're looking for big fish, but in a spot tournament, you don't necessarily got to go catch a monster fish. You can go catch a bunch of them. And the more that you catch, the more likely you're going to catch one with a bunch of spots. And so in this situation, I probably would personally, just me, would opt to use like live or cut baits first thing in the morning as the sun's coming up, get up in some marshes around some oyster bars, and just trying to find a lot of structures that are in the same area, like a creek mouth and a bunch of oyster bars that are right around that creek mouth. And then just soaking those baits out there so that I can put out multiple lines, whether it's live mullet, cut mullet, live shrimp, dead shrimp, cut crab, anything along those lines can be great baits. And you could put a variety out there if you want to see what they want, and just get a bunch of lines out to increase your chances and take advantage of that morning bite up in the marshes. And then once the sun is up and everything starts to heat up, when those fish are going to be moving out, then I would probably try to look for an area that either has like a drop off right at the shoreline, since redfish really like to hold close to those shorelines, or like a channel edge, or as Wyatt said, docks, and soaking those same baits just in those different areas, and just putting as many lines out again as I can. Not saying that artificials and are any better than live bait, or live bait's any better than artificials. That would just be my approach, so that I got a bunch of stuff out there to catch a bunch of fish.
I think your boy John here is going to disagree with you. I've had it here featured. One of our newer VIP members in Southport, North Carolina, lifelong live bait fisherman making the transition to artificials, low tide and early in the morning yesterday. I am a believer now. Nice solid red, nice fat little trout and flounder. That's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. Oh yeah, man. Like artificials, live bait, they're both great. And I think that it's really it's not necessary, but it is a good thing to learn both. The more the more you can go do what you want to do. If you don't want to go and throw lures all day, covering water and stuff like that. Sometimes, I want to go do that and fish like really competitive. And then sometimes I just want to soak some baits out there and just relax and just enjoy the day, especially if I'm bringing like kids or bringing family out there and just trying to have not work too much at least.
I think a good thing to think about is, are you fishing areas that you know or areas that you're trying to find fish in? Like you just mentioned, Austin, if you're trying to cover ground, the areas that you might not know where redfish are, if you know where redfish are, cut bait or live natural baits can be a good option. But if you're just trying to find fish, you've not been out in a couple of weeks, things like that. Look at that. Another token there for the redfish tournament. So that's what 3 looks like.
Yeah, looks like a third spot there. Yep.
Oh yeah. So that's the big thing is,
look
tailor your
look at all the spots on this one. What if we did a speckled trout spot contest?
I think I see a slam shady in the bottom of that picture. Is that down by his foot? It looks like a slam shady.
Good eye, Wyatt.
Yeah. So that's the big thing is, tailor your approach to whether you already know where fish are or you're trying to find them. I would say if you're looking to find fish for the first time in a while, or you're not 100% sure where they are, or you're not getting bites on live bait, start poking around with artificials. You can cover a lot more ground, but once you find them, sometimes that cut bait or that live bait, any kind of natural bait can work really well. So there is merit to both approaches.
Yeah, you're very right there. I would completely agree. If you're looking for the fish, covering water with an artificial is definitely more productive for that. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and going off of that too, one of my favorite ways to catch redfish, probably one of the most difficult at times, is topwater. So like in the mornings, one of my favorite things to do is also use it as a search bait. Because typically when you find a trend, even if the tide's coming in or out, it usually, kind of lasts for a couple hours. So even if you get some really solid and good blowups, those fish are generally going to stay in that area as long as that bait's there. And another really good thing right now, I'm looking outside, it's still raining. So we're getting a lot of rain, especially over here on the East Coast right now. And I'm sure over where you guys are too. So a really good thing to do is kind of put a little bit extra on your bait as well. So like gold spoons work great when you get some high water. You can throw it in the grass, pull them out. I've actually got one of these here, these redfish magics. These are phenomenal as well. Just to, these fish are pretty aggressive right now, especially when those feeding windows are short. When they're in that target zone, they're there to feed. So that's something I've really liked to do, just to search them, and then kind of once you have an idea, there's some good fish in the area, you can do, soak some bait, in some really good target zones, kind of where they're going to start coming in and out to that egress point for later, when there's some deeper water. And then at low tide, exactly what you guys said, man, I have loved fishing docks lately because it's got some good current, deep water docks specifically, ones that have good retaining walls and things like that. Where these fish can go trap up some bait and still be in a comfortable zone.
And you said low tide, and I assume the reason is because it's fewer places for these redfish to hide when the water's out. To White's point, they're going to be underneath the dock. They're not just going to leave and be out 20 feet from it. They will still want to have that structure. So it's just one more way to make it easier at lower tide to know that they're going to most likely be in the deepest spot right there at the edge. And sometimes those shadow lines too, depending on where you are in the time of day. I mean, it's crazy. All of a sudden you hit the shadow line, like, holy smokes, Luke talked about that. I mean, that can be kind of even a form of structure. And if you've ever been diving, Luke and I are heading off to go do a little lobstering. A lot of times we will go dive by those bridges that all have shadow lines, and it's amazing. I mean, the temperature changes, even the amount of fish you see changes when you hit these shadow lines. It almost is like a form of structure because it literally changes the entire environment down underneath the water. It's really pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I would completely agree on that. Anytime I'm ever fishing docks after the sun is up in the air, up in the sky, I'm looking for that shade. And I'm more likely to put my line around that shaded area of the dock than I am on the sunny side of the dock. And same thing with bridges, just like this isn't on redfish, but I was looking for cooler water fishing for sheepshead as well. Because many species are gonna, look for cooler water when the water's hot, and so we fished a bridge because we knew that the bridge would provide some shade as well. So same case there.
Cool. What else? What else do you guys like to look for? There's a nice one there on a Lindell Slam shading.
Yeah, I would say something for any members that may, this may be their first experience really trying to catch a bunch of redfish. I know a lot of our members are just out there to get tight lines, be it trout, snook, whatnot. With redfish, something to keep in mind is generally they are very tidal dependent, where they're going to choose to feed if the temperature allows them to do so. So if the water temperature is not too hot or not too cold, if it's in a Goldilocks zone, as we call it, a lot of times what we'll see is redfish will move into shallower areas on higher tides, and they'll move to deeper areas on lower tides. They generally move with those tides, and they'll put themselves in areas where they know the current's going to bring them food. They're pretty lazy fish. So if you can find areas where, depending on whether the wind's going to be blowing that bait or the current's going to be moving bait, and, Richard had a really good kind of scenario going on up in Jacksonville where there's a lot of rain. And what's going to happen is in the marsh environments where there's a lot of shrimp and there's a lot of crabs and crustaceans, things like that, in very shallow marshes where that grass is kind of, it makes it difficult for redfish to get up in. What's going to happen is when it rains, all that freshwater runoff is going to push those prey items, crabs, shrimp, little bait fish, things like that, out of those shallower marshes. So you can look for those cuts that enter those really shallow areas that redfish usually can't get into. You'll see those cuts as kind of darker spots in the marsh. That freshwater runoff is going to push all those prey items out. And usually that first depth change outside of a marsh cut or outside of the entrance of a flat, things like that, where that runoff is going to occur on, say, an outgoing tide, you're going to find a lot of activity in that area. In fact, the area that I fished this morning, it was very low tide. There was an outgoing tide, and all of the mullet and all of the small shad that were in that area were getting pulled through this little kind of marsh mud flat that had some grass in it. And they were just, redfish were stacked up in there. And all I had to do was fish my bait exactly where that current was moving all of those small shad and small mullet, and those redfish were hopping all over it. So just kind of thinking about where redfish are going to feed in relation to the tide is really key to knowing how to be consistent with them. Because if you're fishing an area that's too deep, when the tide's going up, know that those redfish are usually looking for shallow water hunting opportunities, because that's easiest, that's where it's easiest for them to hunt at a high tide. Now, when that tide drops out and you're fishing, an inch or two of water, if you're not paying attention to where you're fishing, you're wasting your time. So it's really important to keep in mind where these redfish are going to look for hunting opportunities on different tides. That way that you're being efficient with your time on the water. And again, you're getting as many numbers as you can into the boat to try and get that redfish that's got a lot of spots on it.
Yeah, check this out. 20 fish, a lot of them redfish on one morning, and trout, like ladyfish from shore. Gotta love it. See, you don't even have to have a boat. I guess he is on a boat right there, but look at that stringer. Alabama. Talk about scent. Like that Redfish Highway video, that was the one that got a lot of attention with Deeks. And I saw one of the members mentioned that. He's like, I finally found the Redfish Highway. It was really all about scent, right? I mean, we were putting, cut bait out there, and regardless if you're putting cut bait or crabs or shrimp, whatever it is, I mean, a lot of it is scent based, and you're hoping these redfish are going, close enough where they, pick up on it and come eat it. Talk about scent. And do you guys use Dr. Juice? Do you guys use the type of scent? Obviously, if you're using, cut bait or live bait, you automatically are. What are your thoughts there on scent helping you, giving you a little bit of an edge, if you will, on a tournament?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're ever fishing a tournament, you want to add pretty much anything that you can that's going to give you an advantage. And in any situation, scent is always going to be a good thing. So whether you're fishing artificials, I personally like Dr. Juice. I also use Gulp. I've used Procure, but I'm really digging Dr. Juice lately, big time. And yeah, I mean, it's just, they're going to smell it. And if you're finding like picky fish or stuff, that's going to be a big deal. That could be the difference between this fish hitting your bait and not. just simply adding some scent to it. And then same thing with cut bait, so like I said earlier, putting multiple lines out, that's basically what I'm talking about. Finding that redfish highway and putting it in the areas that they're going to be swimming through, because those redfish aren't going to want to just swim out in the middle of nowhere, because there's fish that want to eat them too. So that's one of the reasons why redfish normally hold extremely close to structure or extremely close to the shorelines. And so if you put a cut bait out there, or you're throwing your artificials up in those areas, and adding scent, it's just going to give you that much more of an advantage.
The juice is loose, and that's our exclusive scent that was made for Inshore Slams by the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Juice himself. Has been around since I think he was making scent back in early 80s, and there's been multiple state records caught using his freshwater scents, and he's done a couple saltwater ones, and they teamed up with us to do one really for redfish and speckled trout and snook and flounder, and it flat out works. That one video, Luke, on the dock, I mean, it can't get any more visible than that. Where there's, if you haven't seen it yet, there's a redfish and snook, at a dock light, and he's got a power prawn, and they kind of come up near it, but for the most part, they ignore the power prawn, and he's trying to get a strike. And then right there, I mean, same instance, he sprays Dr. Juice on it and immediately strike. And he does it 2 more times, all sitting there like filming by him. He's cane pulling it. I mean, he literally has his camera in a hand, and he's, just sitting there dropping it in, and these fish are destroying it. And it's like, wow. I mean, the power of a scent. It sometimes this fish are just fired up, right? We've all seen it where they'll hit anything you throw out there, but that's not always the case. And most of the time, it's not the case at all, right? I mean, fish can frustrate the heck out of us. And so to your point, Austin, we want every possible advantage that we can. So I would highly urge you guys to go get a little bottle there, big or small. We got 2 different sizes of Dr. Juice at fishstrong.com. Of course, if you're an insider member, 20% off all the Dr. Juice products and everything else in the store. So one more reason to become an insider. And of course, you can win cool stuff like this belt.
Yeah. I mean, just to talk about the power of juice real quick that I've seen.
Juice is loose.
Yeah.
I mean, resist it.
We talk about, how maybe it's the action of a lure, does the scent actually matter? I've had just the scent alone, like you said in the video with Luke. Some folks might say, oh, maybe he wasn't working the prawn properly. I've used shrimp lures where I've seen redfish tailing, nothing. I've worked them 10 different ways, nothing. And then finally I can see them coming down the bank, and I just knew that they were popping on shrimp. I knew that that's what they were locked in on. And, we've put a lot of research into the Dr. Juice scent. There's actual fish products that are in them. I'm sure there's shrimp scent in it as well. And I literally just left it there, dead sticked at 100%, no twitches, no nothing. I could see where the redfish were coming. So I was able to, put it where I knew they were going to be going over it. And they picked it up just without it moving at all whatsoever. So allowing them to find that scent, like we said, dead sticking. It's the same kind of tactics that you guys used in the Redfish Highways video, but just using it with a kind of artificial scent as well. So it's an awesome scent. I would highly recommend using it. And especially for redfish that have those really big olfactory senses, like we talked about, that's something you don't want to not have on your kayak or your boat when you're trying to get redfish tagged in this tournament.
Yep. Oh yeah. A fish is not going to hit a piece of plastic that's just sitting there on the bottom. So that is proof that scent works.
Yeah. Yep. Richard?
Yeah, there's no doubt, that scent is absolutely crucial. And especially, really in this area, the whole East Coast right now. And I know we had a lot of members lately that have been talking about just how much bait is in the water. I mean, you're competing with thousands of, different types of bait. You've got all the crustaceans, bait fish, finger mullet, bigger mullet are coming in. And that's one more thing that's really going to help your bait stand out. Other than some profile changes and things like that, I mean, adding scent is just absolutely crucial. And, going back, to like dead sticking, like what Austin said, like we got to have something that's going to be a little bit extra, to entice them. And one thing too, going a little bit back further, if you are going to be dead sticking or even using cut bait, that's still that scent factor. But put some Dr. Juice on your lures, whatever. Make sure, you're really going to be in one of those areas where those fish are going to either stop at or where bait's going to stop. So like if you're in a big open bay, and you see, I've even seen big fish hiding behind 6 to 8 inches of a little bit of a grass point. It doesn't take much. So if your bait can be there, and, stay in that zone, eventually one of those redfish will come by and take it. And if you've got scent on it, it looks like food, it's acting like food, and it smells like it probably is food. So they're probably going to eat it.
Good stuff. What else? What other little tips and tactics for redfish in late summer?
Well, you can't forget, I don't know if we've already covered this or not, but out of all the spots that we've talked about, everything that we talked about, one of the most important things is going to be finding that bait. If you find an area that's got good structure, that looks great, and you're not seeing any bait, I wouldn't waste too much time there. Getting out and finding that bait is going to be very important because the fish want to eat, and that's what they're looking for.
So, Wyatt, signs of bait today when you were catching all these reds?
Absolutely. I mean, I saw.
What do you know? What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, we saw all of this current pushing these mullet, pushing these small shad. I can see the shad leaping out of the water, and they don't jump like mullet do. They jump 6 or 7 at a time when they're running from something. Those mullet, and a lot of people that might be new to going after redfish in shallow water, you're going to see mullet jumping out of the water that I guess they got an identity crisis. They think they're dolphin or something. If you see a single mullet that's just jumping and it looks like it's just having a good time, that's not a fish that's running from something. You're looking for 3-4 mullet at a time that are skirting along the surface of the water. They're scared. They're running from something. You're looking for 6 or 7 shad, and shad are generally, the length of your index finger. And they're going to be jumping 3, 4, 5 at a time along the surface of the water. Those mullet that are just loners that are jumping 3, 4 feet in the air and they're belly flopping 4 times in a row, those aren't fish that are scared of something, that are running from something. That's not the bait I'm looking for. I'm looking for bait that's running from stuff. Another good indicator is birds, and something that I've been seeing lately in the areas I've been going and targeting is rosette spoonbills. And that is an awesome bird to see because we know that they're not after bait fish. We know that they're after shrimp. That's just the way that their bill's designed. I don't believe they hunt bait fish very well, but we know redfish this time of year, they're very opportunistic hunters, and shallow marshes that have really high concentrations of shrimp, there's almost always redfish there. There's always going to be scattered shrimp on grass flats, but when there's really high concentrations of shrimp, you're going to see these rosette spoonbills. And that's always, to me, I can't think of a time I've ever been in an area where I've seen spoonbills and I've not caught redfish. So I know that they're not available everywhere, or that these birds aren't localized everywhere. But if you ever see these birds in a small marsh flat, know that there's a very good chance that there's redfish around feeding on shrimp, and that you can tailor your tackle choice. I mean, that bird alone right there tells you what lure you need to throw and if you're in the right area. So I love seeing those kind of birds. Some of the other, the herons, they might be after shrimp, they might be after bait fish. Any kind of wading bird is a good sign, but I love seeing spoonbills, and I saw 4 or 5 of them this morning in the spot that I caught up to 25 redfish in. So that's another good sign to look for. The birds and the bait, really big keys. If you're in a kayak, sometimes those boils can be hard to see, but 3Bs, always want to hammer that home. Look for the birds, the bait, and the boils.
Can you see this one?
Oh yeah, I can see that, and he's got an interesting little mug on him. You managed to find the worst picture of a.
No, this is the best. This is what they do. They're known. They literally wait, like you can see the grass and the water. It's literally waving you down, saying, "Here's where the redfish are." This is what they do. That's not true at all, but this is what they look like.
Hey, I saw a redfish that had 28 spots. You can win the tournament. He's letting you know.
Here, you like this one better?
Yeah, I mean, that bill is for feeding on crustaceans. That's not a bait fish eating bill. So that tells you that they're there after shrimp, which kind of helps you kind of dial in your tackle choices a little bit better. I was throwing top water this morning. It was working really well. But when I went to this spot, and I was kind of scouting it out a little while ago, I did see that there was a lot of shrimp there as well. So I'm sure that those redfish later on in the day, I didn't stay out too late to find out, but I'm sure that changing my subsurface presentation to a smaller shrimp wouldn't be too bad of an option, just because there's a lot of these birds feeding there. And I know that shrimp might be a primary forage in that area.
Wyatt, I would like to applaud you on knowing the name of that bird, because I had no clue. And I don't know that this is that same specific bird. It looks extremely similar, but the ones that I see are typically all white. And there was a tip that I picked up actually from Captain Caleb, that you've done a few videos with now.
Could be a juvenile.
And he said that if you ever see two of those birds that are close to each other, that they actually really don't get along. So if you ever see two of those birds in the same area, that means that they are there for a reason. And I was hesitant. I'm not going to lie. I was hesitant to believe just the fact that they didn't like each other. Sure enough, I've actually seen them fighting and like getting mad at each other and stuff like that. So that's a great point on the birds. But I applaud you for actually knowing the name, because I don't know the name of the bird that he was actually talking about.
Yep, pays to be a bird nerd. So
Yep.
Absolutely.
Wyatt spends time as a volunteer at the Audubon Society on his weekends. Loves picnics and spoonbills.
I'll have to say that the original bird nerd on the team was Luke. He taught me about ospreys and all the different egrets, things like that. You'd be surprised the connectedness of all the different life on flats. We could have a whole podcast on different wildlife other than the game fish that we're after that key in on. I mean, we talk about stingrays and stuff all the time too. There's a lot of wildlife out there, but birds are the easiest one for us to see because they're above the water. So it does definitely pay to be a bird nerd in that respect.
Yep. And I think we're forgetting one, guys, or at least I think we are. We may have said something about it, but another really important thing is going to be wind. Like we were talking about with the hot water, that wind is going to cool it down. And then also the sun's cooking the oxygen out of that hot water, and that wind is going to churn it up and put some oxygen back into it, which is also going to be really important here in our summer months. So add that to your game plan when you go to look for these redfish as well. And what I mean by that is the wind is blowing on the shoreline. So rather than you being out of the wind where you're protected from it, you actually want to be in the wind where the wind is hitting the shoreline or blowing across that structure that you're fishing.
Ideally, not casting into the wind and having your lure get half the distance.
Well, sometimes if you are fishing a really heavy current area, there's always a caveat to stuff. But if you are having to cast into the wind, spoons aren't a bad option, or top water, something heavy that's not going to get stopped. Soft plastics usually are the worst, but spoons do a good job cutting into the wind, or use, a heavy top water like a moonwalker to just really punch in there. Sometimes it's not an option, but just know that you can do that. That's to play devil's advocate here.
Love it. Cool. Anything else, guys?
I think we've covered everything that folks need to know to catch a bunch of redfish that have lots of spots on them.
Yeah, and I did write down, I think that will be a great podcast, is best wildlife to see, on a flat or a, oyster bar, mangrove line, whatever, that indicates there are feeding fish around. So stay tuned for that one. That will be a future podcast, because I think we could knock out, especially get Luke on there, because he is a little bit of a bird nerd. And not just birds. I mean, different types of crustaceans and other things that you might see on a flat to indicate that it's a lively one. So stay tuned on that one. Otherwise, for you insider members, continue to keep putting your posts in. And the good news is, don't feel like you've missed out. Even if you're on a member, you want to join today. The beauty about a redfish spot tournament, it's based on one fish. You can submit 50,000 redfish if you want to, but it only comes down to one. So one fish, one side, and someone could win the last day. I mean, literally, that's what's cool about tournaments like this is, every cast could mean, winning something cool. So that's all obviously not nice. It just adds a little bit more fun to every time you're making a cast out there. But two, it could literally be at 8:00. Sun is going down. It's the last day. It's the 31st day of the month. And you still have a chance to win this belt and the stickers and all the other cool stuff we're giving away. So never too late to join, and never too late. Just go out there and wet a line. You never know what's going to happen. And I cannot wait to see who wins this monster championship belt. And I'm really pumped to start getting some of these stickers out there as well, and seeing them on the back of your vehicles and boats, etc. And we'll do more. I know we've heard from a lot of people already that are really excited to do some other tournaments and give away some other decals. And it's just so much fun in the insider community. So if you're not a member, what the heck you waiting on? We have the biggest, boldest guarantee out there. You will catch fish and you will save money, or you don't pay. It's that simple. It's all about fishing smarter, putting you in the 90-10 zone, in the right spot at the right time all year long. Even if you don't have a boat, even if you don't have a a fancy kayak or anything else. We have a lot of people, and you probably saw as I was scanning through some of the reports, there's a lot of people catch a lot of fish just from shore. Wyatt, were you out in a boat or wading today?
I was out in my boat today.
Yeah. So you completely killed where I was going with that, but
I'll tell you what, one of my best days of when Wader Dave came down, up until today, I would say I had my best redfish day wading in Texas. So you can definitely hit some good redfish. I had a redfish during that trip. I would have loved to have submitted in this tournament. Had probably 10, 15 spots on it, but I guess I would still be in second place there. But yeah, you can definitely get it done wading as well.
oh yeah. I mean, it's the same, really the same mechanics, right? And the trends all still apply, regardless if you're fishing out of wading boots or a kayak or a boat. It's all still relative. It just, it makes it tougher in terms of, not being able to move as quickly, and you have to do a little bit more pre-trip planning, but that's part of the fun. And that's part of what we teach you, just how to do it quickly, and even using things like wildlife to identify what a good spot is. So I'm actually pretty excited about that podcast, and I'm finally going to get to learn some of the real names about these birds.
Have to be a bird nerd, Joe.
Yeah, I'll turn into a little bird nerd and get my Audubon Society card in the mail. And all right, guys, this is a good one. We appreciate you, and for those of you that are members, once again, start posting those pics. Make sure you got your token. If you don't, it's right there in the community. You can get it printed out. It does not have to be in color, even black and white. We want you guys to have fun. It's all free, and cannot wait to see who wins this bad boy. Otherwise, we will talk to you guys in the next episode. If you're not a member, go to saltstrong.com right now, and you will see a little button to join us completely risk-free today. Saltstrong.com. Join us in the club. Cannot wait to see you in there, and cannot wait to see how many new fish, new memories you are creating. Peace. Thanks, Richard, Austin, Wyatt. Great job, guys.
Later, guys.
Peace.
All right.
We out of here. I got to stop share, and then I can end this thing. All right. That is it. Later.